even allowed 125,000
Who in the future could work, yeah? Children don't come over here and not work, do they?
This is making us poorer. It's very interesting. Everyone says we need net migration for GDP, the size of the national cake. Actually, GDP per capita, per person, has fallen for the last 6 years.
Nigel Farage walked into the BBC studio and faced some of the most hostile interviews ever on television. From the beginning, it was clear that the hosts were not going to be friends. They asked direct questions, delivered with sharp tones. But Farage had other ideas, and when he finished, the BBC hosts were speechless. Their plan to paint him as uninformed and unprepared failed in such remarkable fashion. They couldn't believe their plan could crumple so quickly. But that is exactly what happened.
Of the debate around the, well, they called it the grooming gang scandal, but it's not, it's the mass rape scandal. I just think people ask themselves, what has happened to our country? How could this possibly have happened? Why did everybody want to cover it up? Why has there been no full public inquiry? People are angry about that, yes, and they're right to be. Absolutely right to be.
Nigel Farage didn't just answer their questions, he owned the studio when he was done. Every question they threw at him, irrespective of what their intention was for the question, was met with vivid, sharp answers from Farage. It was like watching a master at work while his critics struggled to keep up. And here is the thing, the more they pushed, the calmer Farage appeared. The harder they tried to tap him, the better his responses became.
That if you're loyal to him, he's loyal to you. And that's what friendships are based on.
And is his friend, Elon Musk, now your friend? And is he going to give you millions of pounds?
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Now, what, I mean, you know, forget about the $100 million being talked about in the newspapers.
Are you going to give you money?
That is for the birds.
Is he going to give you money?
He may well do. He may well do. But it's got to be legal. He's got to be comfortable with it. He may well give us money. Whether he does or not, I'll tell you what he gives us. With huge numbers of young people, he makes us look cool.
Is the reason you hope he's going to give you money, is that why you don't want to criticise him?
I think I've made it perfectly clear that I don't agree with everything he stands for, but I do believe in free speech. I think he's a hero, and I said that well before any potential money was offered.
There was no hesitation, no second guessing. His words came in a calm voice, but were delivered with a powerful conviction that left the hosts completely exposed and speechless. But what did he say that made seasoned journalists speechless live on air? Make sure you stick around till the end to have the full details of this epic interview.
By the way, I'm all for people coming into Britain and British people working abroad. I'm all for it. But the scale on which this is happening is appalling. And for the Conservatives, it is a complete breach.
What's appalling about it?
Nigel Farage is a household name in British politics. But he has elevated his status with the latest interview with the BBC. After the interview, many began asking for him to run for office as the PM. Some even asked, is this the type of leadership the country needs? The truth is that Farage and the Reform Party are winning over hearts with his interviews. And the causes he supports are receiving more support with each passing day. While the host had a more sinister intention in mind, with questions meant to corner, confuse or tamper his credibility, Farage gave concise, intelligent answers to these questions. His replies were not vague or scripted like most politicians in the UK. It was like watching a craftsman work. Every answer came with facts that his critics couldn't argue with or deny.
So you claim that Brexit will help Britain prosper. Why hasn't it?
In economic terms, if you look at our exports, we've gone from the day we voted Brexit to now, from being the world's 7th biggest exporter to the world's 4th biggest exporter.
Not in trade, as I'm sure you'll concede.
Well, trade and services.
In services and gold, but not in trade.
Well, trade is both. Trade is both. So,
not in goods, I'm so sorry, in goods.
No. Well, in goods. Well, we've given up manufacturing things is part of the reason for that. But I want to say this. There are two massive disappointments with Brexit, and one of them is economic. 5.5 million men and women in this country running small limited companies or acting as sole traders, living under a huge, burdensome rule book, living under VAT thresholds that are too low, damaging genuine growth and prosperity in the economy. Those of us that voted Brexit, those of us that saw an 80-seat majority for Boris Johnson in 2019, the opportunity to free up those small businesses, to get rid of rules and regulations, and the Conservative government have done none of it. And that is a huge regret. It's not a failure of Brexit, it's a failure to deliver what people voted for.
By the end of the interview, every attempt to make him foolish completely failed, and the hosts were helpless. The aftermath of the interview created an uproar on social media, and public discourse was filled with praise for Farage and his Reform Party. His calm, confident and intelligent replies resonated with many Britons, who are not used to seeing politicians in the modern era speak from their hearts.
Stuck into why you're boycotting the BBC?
Right from the start of this campaign, the BBC have behaved like a political actor. I remember the first interview I did on the Today programme, I came off there and thought, there's no point. There's literally no point. No opportunity to talk about policy, about ideas. But what happened on Friday with that question time audience was truly astonishing. First question gets asked by a chap who has himself produced 8 programmes for the BBC, including the very woke now Doctor Who.
Right.
So he gets to ask a question. Third question is asked by a chap who's a well-known street Palestinian campaigning activist. I think question number 7 or 8 was asked by a girl who's a very active left-wing campaigner, which is perhaps fine. Point I'm making is, a question time audience is supposed to be representative of the country as we go into the final week of a general election. It was miles from that. And I did ask the BBC for an apology.
Having said that, does that necessarily disadvantage you? Because you know what you believe. You're a robust communicator. You get taken on by people that don't agree with you. Then it's you can position yourself very strongly.
Look, I'm all for a free and fair debate. Goodness gracious me! But I've now done a series of big BBC programmes over the last few weeks, and every single audience has been tilted towards either the Green or the Labour Party in the most astonishing way.
They refute that, and I will read their statement at the end, but fair enough.
But is it really a surprise that people are impressed with Farage? Frankly, it shouldn't, because at a time when politicians are more interested in following carefully crafted statements, it is a rarity to see a person handle such a level of scrutiny and still speak from the heart. No wonder his party Reform UK is gaining momentum. And this is not something that was made up for this video. These are facts, and we are going to you through them.
Young kids can't get houses. The fact that rents are up over 20%
so
over the last 3 years.
You're blaming migrants
I'm blaming the population explosion. It's as simple as that. The Conservatives promised in the last 4 manifestos to reduce the level of net migration. In fact, in 3 of them, they promised to tens of thousands a year. It is now 750,000. That is a complete breach of...
Following Farage's resumption of leadership during the 2024 general election, there was a sharp increase in support for the party. Following the election, it was the 3rd largest party by popular vote, with 4,117,610 votes, achieving 14.3% of the vote in total. The rapid growth of the party has even the Conservatives worried, with Tories leader Kemi Badenoch accusing the party of deceit. Bombshell polls have revealed where Reform UK would gain Labour seats across the country at a general election.
A judgment you stand by. George Robertson, former Labour cabinet minister, who went on to become the Secretary-General of NATO, has in the last couple of weeks said the war is a direct result of EU expansion.
More in Common released its first MRP of the new Parliament, which revealed a dramatic shift in Britain's electoral dynamics. This poll also suggested that if an election in the Parliament is held, Reform UK will get as many as 120 seats, which will make them the 3rd biggest party in the country. That is not a small achievement. It is a warning shot to the political establishment. And the reason for this massive growth of Reform UK isn't just about the growing frustration with the old parties. It has to do more with the way Farage handles himself during interviews.
I feel increasingly we're broken socially, and it doesn't matter what crime statistics the government quotes at us, we all feel less safe on our streets. And I think we've reached a point now where most crime even goes unreported. And I'm in absolutely no doubt that we are in decline culturally. We've begun to forget who we are, what our history is, what we stand for. We've put up with the minds of our children from a young age right through university, frankly, being poisoned about what this country is and what it represents. And all of this would be manageable if there were some clear political solutions. But I think our politics is perhaps as broken as all of the other factors that I've listed. And
His message is resonating with people who feel disappointed and left behind by Labour and the Conservatives. And here is where it gets more interesting. Farage's vision for leadership is beginning to look more realistic. His clarity on issues such as immigration and reforms are starting to strike a chord with the frustrated electorate. He is positioning himself as a voice of common sense in a political landscape full of confusion and scandals.
But as I say, here we are with one of the biggest changes in politics that's ever occurred, and you're not even interested.
Do you still
What's wrong with the BBC?
Do you still want to
What is wrong with the BBC?
Do you still want to roll back gun controls and reintroduce handguns to this country?
This sums it up. Do you know, I've been going around the country speaking at packed rallies every night. And do you know who's not there? The BBC. And from this line of questioning now, I can see why.
Do you still?
You're just not interested, are you?
Do you still feel uncomfortable with foreign languages being spoken on trains?
Let's talk about democracy. Let's talk about trust. Let's talk about competence in politics. This is ludicrous.
You still do.
This is absolutely ludicrous. I've never in my life seen a more ridiculous interview than this. You are not prepared to talk about what is going on in this country today. You're in denial. The BBC's in denial. The Tory and Labour parties are in denial. I think you're all in for a bigger surprise on Thursday week than you can even imagine. What is your question? What is the relevance of this?
I'm trying to work out who you are and where the Brexit Party, which wants to destroy the party system, is going.
You haven't asked about a single other member of the Brexit Party. You haven't commented on the fact we've got the most diverse list of candidates of any party fighting in this election.
From the Revolutionary Communist Party right through to the right.
Well, that's worth discussing, isn't it? How have we managed to get left and right together? These things are really interesting to your viewers, not trawling back through a series of quotes from years ago.
With every interview, rally and policy announcement, the idea of Farage as Prime Minister feels less like a wild headline, but more of a serious possibility. If the surge continues, Farage won't just be leading a movement, he will be spearheading a government. That scenario is one the current political class might not be ready for at the moment, or anytime soon, to be honest. But the momentum may be too much for anyone to stop Farage.
Call it a pressure group, call it a party. You were a candidate to be an MP on a ballot paper in an election.
Mate. How many times have you stood?
How many times have you stood?
What do you know about it? How many times have you stood?
I'm asking you the question, Mr. Farage. I mean, the challenge here is people will say, look, you've tried it before,
well, I tell you
didn't manage to do it. What makes this time any different?
Ask something intelligent and we'll carry on with the conversation, shall we?
I'm interested in why people should trust you that 7 times previously you didn't manage to do that.
No.
You also.
I think you're very, very boring, and I think your viewers will find you very boring, and you ought to do rather better as the state broadcaster, in my view.
Did ask Nigel Farage for an interview tonight here on Newsnight. He declined.
A newly joined party member said he was there because Farage is a breath of fresh air, and current politicians were failing to give younger generations a chance to get on. A Reform councillor from Suffolk said people were cross about the idea of pylons going everywhere as the government plans more green energy. They might have listed different reasons, but that obvious unhappiness is what seems to be driving the rapid growth of Reform UK.
I may be speaking from the back of the chamber today, but as I predicted last time I was here, in the European elections, the Brexit Party were very much to the front of the elections and massive, massive winners. And I come back to a place that has been humbled and humiliated. The European Council stitch-up has rendered this place impotent until today, when you've got some real power if you choose to use it. What you've seen from Ursula von der Leyen today is an attempt for the European Union to take control of every single aspect of our lives. She wants to build a centralised, undemocratic, updated form of communism that will render nation-state parliaments, where the state controls everything, where nation-state parliaments will cease to have any relevance at all. I have to say, from our perspective, in some ways, I'm really rather pleased, because you've just made Brexit a lot more popular in the United Kingdom. Thank God we're leaving.
With new financial backers and a rapidly growing base, Reform UK does, at this moment, seem to have a big momentum. Farage claims he's putting the party on the path to winning the next election. We have to face reality. Frankly, since the election, Labour's sagging popularity and the Tories' doldrums have made space that Farage and his 4 fellow Reform MPs have stepped into. The party has used his tried and tested techniques, talking about issues in a way that other politicians just won't. He would say those politicians are too cautious or politically correct. They'd say they have a responsibility not to stir up tensions. Whether you like him or not, Farage has become a voice of reason in a chaotic political landscape, so it isn't a surprise that people are growing fond of the idea of him becoming Prime Minister." Unquote. Do you think Farage will become the next Prime Minister? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.